The weight loss treatment market has seen significant growth in recent years, and top players like Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly have their sights set on the next pivotal innovation. The second annual BMO Obesity Summit, with insights from leaders in the industry, provided a glimpse into advances in these GLP-1 drug therapies and other types of therapies as well. Here to discuss, BMO Capital Markets Managing Director Evan Seigerman, who was there talking to all these players in the industry. It must have been really interesting.
It was a fantastic
this
day.
year.
To have all the key players
Yeah.
is perfect. We had Amgen, Lilly, Novo in a row. And then you have, Row Health, you have physicians. So you're really bringing together all the key players from pharma to providers to telehealth to figure out how we're going to get all these drugs to patients.
Okay, so if I want to invest in one of these companies, what is the next key thing I need to be watching for?
It is all about Orforglipron. So this is Lilly's small molecule GLP-1 pill. Data's coming second quarter, which is next week. Could come on earnings, which is May 1st. So we had their VP of metabolic research talking about the program, very positive body language, talking about blinded data. And when we look at that, they can kind of tell what the trial is going to show. And her body language is very positive, very pleased with what she was seeing. So we're very bullish on Lilly.
How is that one different than the stuff that's on the market?
So this is a pill, daily pill. So think of it as Wegovy in a pill, same target. Tirzepatide, a little more kind of higher efficacy, but that's a once weekly injectable. So this could be for patients who don't want the shot, who are sick of taking the shot, needle phobic, or other parts of the world where you can't really get the shot.
Supply constraints generally, Evan, how are those sort of evolving?
Most definitely. So Lilly's done a great job. They are able to supply the market. They are actually building up Orforglipron ahead of a launch so they don't have the Zepbound issues. Novo has finally recovered, bringing starter doses into the supply chain as of January. So we're starting to see new patients on Wegovy. But that really took a hit for Novo. I mean, the new patient starts for Wegovy are really slowing versus Zepbound.
I was interested in, you talked about in your note reviewing the conference, that a lot of patients have trouble staying on these drugs for longer than a year. What can and what are some of these drug makers doing to try to work with doctors to keep that consistency?
Right, and that's a huge issue because they're very powerful drugs and they work well if you're on them. What we're seeing is that, providers who are not really trained to be prescribing these are prescribing them. If you don't have the proper support, you're not going to do well. So you need either, trained clinicians in obesity medicine, really intensive telehealth platforms like Row. We had the CEO of Row, for example, at the conference, engaging with patients, making sure that, when they have side effects, someone's helping with them. When they need to reorder, they're being reminded to reorder their drug. And if they switch insurance, they have someone that can help navigate it. That's a huge issue, of course, if they have to get a reauthorization.
Evan, you see Medicare coverage for GLP-1s for obesity ultimately?
Eventually, it's, DC's a tough place to predict right now. I don't want to get into the business of figuring out what's happening in DC. We did have some movement last year with the Biden administration, but with Trump probably not going to push forward on that. TROIA, which is the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act, had been floated. Remember, Medicare Part D plans can cover Zepbound for sleep apnea and Wegovy for cardiovascular disease, but not a lot of the Part D plans do. So it's tough in a year where they're trying to re-up the tax cuts of 2017.
And what kind of signals have we gotten from RFK Jr., who has expressed some animosity or at least ambivalence towards some of these drugs in the past?
Well, what's interesting when he talks, he always picks on Novo. He never talks about Lilly. He's always talking about that Danish company and Ozempic. He never says Zepbound or Lilly. I don't know if that's a hometown, hero thing. But, I think it's clear that he's not going to be like, a rah-rah, let's get these through. He's going to put up some resistance.
What could he actually do, though, Evan? Let's say he was opposed to them. What levers could he pull to make it?
Well, I think he could just kind of put pressure on lawmakers to not pass TROIA. He could, recommend that Part D plans, don't do this. Rescind that kind of guidance. I think that there are some kind of more regulatory things. I don't really know if he's going to do it. That's more hypothetical, but it doesn't seem like there's a champion to get these covered. You kind of need a champion in DC to get anything done, and I don't think he's that guy, unfortunately.
So when it comes to the specific companies, I think you've got an outperform on almost all of them?
On almost all of them, yeah.
So do you think investors just need to buy the space here?
Well, Yes and no. I think near term, I'm much more bullish on Lilly. I like the Orforglipron setup. I'm a little cautious on Novo. I'm pretty clear about that.
You outline the reasons for that, Evan.
So, looking at script numbers, I see Zepbound scripts going up, Wegovy kind of flatlining. I'm concerned as we head into 1Q potentially. And I also think that if the Orforglipron data is really good, that's just going to pressure Novo shares because people say, oh, Lilly's got this, what does Novo have? Remember, Novo had the CagriSema data that was somewhat disappointing. We've talked about that. Later in the year, I am more positive on things like the EVOKE trial, which is the potential use of semaglutide in Alzheimer's could be positive. And I still like the obesity duopoly, but near term, I see those dynamics as well.
Is the lack of coverage here going to be anything of a curb or limit the sales of this stuff?
So, in the commercial space, we're seeing a lot of good coverage. I mean, employers are figuring out how to get access for their, employees. Medicare, we just talked about that. That's going to be an issue, kind of a headwind. I think what's really interesting is we're seeing a lot in the cash pay space. So, Roe is partnered with Lilly on Lilly Direct, so the $500 or so per patient per month vials. Novo announced a similar plan. And I think what that's doing is essentially giving patients access to like the rebates and discounts that a PBM would have gotten. So they're paying for like the actual cost that Novo or Lilly would want. That could help open up, but of course that's early days, and it's still $500 bucks a month. That's a lot. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Evan, always great to see you, especially on set.
Oh my God, I love being here.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.